There are only two possibilities. Each option is mutually exclusive and incompatible with the other. To some extent they exist in an inverse ratio, meaning the more of one, the less of the other. This is largely an illusion as the two options are incompatible and contradictory. Therefore, one can lessen the one by an admixture of the other, but the other is not really in existence in this environment. But the point is, one cannot fix the evil without an admixture of good, but good is not truly present, so long as evil is mixed in with the good. To put it another way, evil cannot be purified or turned into an absolute. It must have good mixed in it. But to have good is to have an absolute. We cannot have evil mixed in with good and have what is truly good. This is not semantics, and it is important to grasp the conceptualization. The Bible talks about good and evil in many different ways under different guises. There is the unsaved and the saved. There is the spiritually aware and those of the flesh. In the narrative of the Bible, there is a sharp line of demarcation between the world of the flesh and the world of the spirit. One dies to the flesh to be born in the spirit. We who are saved are not to associate with those of the flesh. We are not to marry nor be yoked unequally with them. Indeed, we are to separate. The Church has not fully appreciated the depth of the divide between the Church and the state. Christians have looked at the world through the eyes of the flesh and have not seen much that is different. Christians have physical bodies, and we are in the world, but we were never meant to be of it. This is not our home and the unsaved are not our people. However, many and indeed most if not all, cannot see where the line is between the saved and the unsaved. We know Christians have faith in Christ, but for most Christians, this is a subjective thing. They see little or no difference between a fan of a sports team and a servant of Christ. The faith is substantially the same, and while a fan of one team may take issue with the fan of a competing team, essentially, they both like sports and can associate on another level, away from the game. But this is a very uneducated way of seeing Christianity and its relationship with the world. The Church binds believers to it, and this binds them in heaven. This is a serious business, yet the churches in this world have little sense of creating a single, monolithic culture. Indeed, most churches are protective of their differences and often highlight these more than anything they have in common with other churches. Perhaps this is because they fail to understand just how distinct the church is from the world. Believers do not see church and state as competing options. The church, according to most believers, is actually a product of the state. Most churches are licensed as charities or not-for-profit organizations, by the state. Thus, they get their identity from the state. If this is all the church is, then reality is all of one substance. The church is only different from the state in a relativistic way. There are similarities between the church and commercial establishments. The differences between the institutions of the state are one of degree, not one of quality. This kind of thinking, typified as an element of the one reality hypothesis, turns the Bible into a lie. But the lie appears plausible if we cannot see a deep and unbridgeable divide between the two groups. But how can God save us if we are qualitatively the same as an unbeliever? What is the church if it is akin to a social club? Too many do not understand the fundamental impact non-belief has. If there is no God, then we are unrestricted in what we can do. Indeed, there is no moral foundation for us to base our choices on, than our own power. We cannot say something is wrong if it can be done, because if the person or nation can do it, all arguments otherwise are moot. Without God, mankind lives by the law of the jungle, might makes right and the end justifies the means. If we can do it, then we have the right to do it, and there is no means by which this belief can be overturned. This might appear to be a bad thing, but what is power? How is it expressed but through access to property? Power that does not result in the greater possession of property is irrelevant. We can claim all kinds of power, but if we do not acquire property through the exercise of power, we are but a child playing imaginary games. If we have no access to property, we have no power. Without access to the things of God, the natural world, we cannot survive. The natural world was given to the church to steward and to have dominion over. This is not for political reasons or simply an exercise in authoritarianism. Technically, the earth has been given to mankind for our use, but it is only the Church that fulfills the necessary conditions to be a caretaker. We have the responsibility of stewards, not the freedom to be parasites. But only the Church has the structure to care for the earth in a responsible way. This administrative style can be considered a type of mutualism. Mutualist philosophy traces its roots to the utopian socialist movements of the early 19th century, particularly in England and France. The term mutualism was first used in the 1820s, initially defined in broad terms synonymous with mutual aid, reciprocity, and fair play. English socialist Thomas Spence laid early foundations by drawing from biblical and liberal ideas, such as those of John Locke and James Harrington, to advocate for the abolition of private property and workers' control of production through cooperatives. In 1822, French utopian philosopher Charles Fourier employed the term convergent compound mutualism to describe an educational system based on progressive, reciprocal teaching methods. Robert Owen, a key figure in the cooperative movement, further advanced these ideas through Owenism, which emphasized communal living and mutual support, becoming a pioneering force in cooperative history. The philosophy was most prominently formalized by French anarchist and socialist Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, often regarded as the father of mutualism. In 1840, Proudhon published What is Property, famously declaring, "Property is theft," to critique exploitative forms of ownership while advocating for possession based on use. He proposed mutualism as an economic system centered on workers' self-management, mutual credit banks to provide interest-free loans, and equitable exchange based on the labor theory of value, where goods are traded according to the labor required to produce them. Proudhon's vision included voluntary associations, federalism, and the organization of society on egalitarian principles without state interference. His ideas influenced the French socialist movement and played a role in the establishment of the International Workingmen's Association, IWA, or First International, in 1864, where mutualists initially held sway. Proudhon's mutualism bridged collectivist and individualist anarchism, endorsing small-scale private property, based on occupancy and use, but opposing capitalism, rent, profit, and non-nominal interest as forms of exploitation. He envisioned a gradual transition where mutualist institutions would grow within the existing system until they supplanted it, replacing the command of people with the administration of things. Mutualism crossed the Atlantic and influenced American individualist anarchists. Josiah Warren, often credited with independently developing similar ideas around the same time as Proudhon, established experimental communities like the Cincinnati Times Store, 1827 to 1830, where goods were exchanged based on labor time via labor notes. William Batchelder Greene and Benjamin Tucker further refined these concepts. Tucker translated Proudhon's works and promoted mutualism through his periodical, Liberty, 1881 to 1908, emphasizing free banking, mutual credit, and the abolition of monopolies on land, money, and tariffs. These thinkers viewed mutualism as a means to achieve liberty through voluntary associations, distinguishing it from collectivist philosophies by supporting private property in the products of one's labor. By the 1870s, mutualism faced competition within the anarchist movement. Mikhail Bakunin, initially inspired by Proudhon's federalism, broke from mutualist economics toward collectivism, advocating common ownership of land. The IWA split in 1872 between Marxists and anti-authoritarians, with mutualism gradually losing ground. Figures like César de Papa and Claude Pelletier continued minor developments, and mutualist ideas influenced the Paris Commune of 1871. After Bakunin's death in 1876, Peter Kropotkin advanced anarchist communism, distributing resources, from each according to ability, to each according to need, further eclipsing mutualism. In Spain, mutualist ideas found fertile ground in the 19th century, contributing to the growth of anarcho-syndicalism. In the early 20th century, mutualist concepts were adapted by economists like Ralph Borsodi, decentralized production, and Silvio Gesell, alternative currencies. Gustav Landauer incorporated mutualism into his program during the Bavarian Soviet Republic, 1918 to 1919, emphasizing mutual credit and usufruct property rights. Mutualist ideas were implemented in local exchange trading systems, LETs, and models of alternative currency. Later in the century, thinkers such as Paul Goodman, C. George Bonello, Colin Ward, and Peter Lamborn Wilson drew inspiration from mutualism. In the late 20th century, Larry Gamboni attempted to revive the movement through the voluntary cooperation movement, recruiting figures like Jonathan Simcock and Joe Peacock, though it was short-lived. Examples of mutualist practices include the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation in Spain, a federation of worker cooperatives, and Desjardins credit unions in Canada, demonstrating scalable mutual aid in manufacturing, retail, and finance. Mutualism experienced a resurgence in the early 2000s, particularly through left libertarianism and market-oriented anarchism. Kevin Carson's 2004 book, Studies in Mutualist Political Economy, integrated mutualist principles with modern economics, including marginal utility theory from Austrian economics, while critiquing state-backed capitalism. This new-style mutualism has influenced peer-to-peer economies, open-source movements, and contemporary cooperatives like Mondragon. Today, mutualism is seen as a gradualist, implementable alternative to both capitalism and state socialism, emphasizing free markets without exploitation, and it continues to evolve in discussions around decentralized finance and worker self-management. Mutualism as a social movement leapfrogs over more conventional ideas, taking us closer to where we need to go, but it does not address the real problem, and therefore, falls victim to them as much as the ideas it was intended to fix, do. The mutualists foresaw the future clearer than many, but not the source of the problem. This was as hidden from the mutualist writers as much as it was hidden from Adam Smith, Karl Marx and many others. The problem is parasitism. What mutualists did not appreciate is that the common man can be as greedy and as self-serving as any capitalist. Greed is not the vice only of the wealthy. We can get rid of private ownership, and public ownership as well, but how will things be shared? If there is a building and used, who decides on its use? Do we use committees, democracy, or some other mechanism? Whatever system we use, it cannot be exploited by those who already have power, nor can it be a random process. If we are to decide how resources are allocated, it has to result in a usage that everyone would wish if he or she was not going to benefit in any way from whatever choice was made. That is, if the person was never going to benefit directly from the choice made, what usage would he or she like to see come about? The use of any asset ought to be that use that benefits the system as a whole more than any individual part. Mutualism never made this qualification possible to implement. This is because, like our other systems, it failed to understand ownership completely. We own only what we create, and the only one who creates physical reality is God. Therefore, God owns nature, and the Church, as God's representative on earth, exercises power of attorney over earth. But we use the things of this earth for the good of all. Assets are allocated where the need is greatest. A car, for example, goes to the person whose use of it will produce the most added value to the community. A doctor who makes house calls needs the car more than a doctor who operates out of his office. But these choices are not made irresponsibly. When assets are moved, their value is taken from the buyer and transferred to the seller, as the buyer cannot have the asset and the value of the asset. Value is created by work. The Church gets the product, and the worker gets the VA, paid into his or her account in the form of equity. These account units are used as the Church's currency. The work of the worker earns equity credits, and these credits are then used by the worker to purchase what goods and services he requires. If assets are transferred from one department or business to another, the buyer pays the seller in credits. Because these assets can only be used to workers to produce value for the Church, there is no reason to buy assets that have little to no use. Mutualism applies to the world, but in practice it refers to the local economy. However, it is not that we all own nature, it is that we all have a right to add value to nature. Or to put it a better way, no one has a right to what is under the care of all. We need to live in balance, both as a group and as individuals. What we take out, we need to replace. We all have the responsibility to add value to the earth. Because we all have a responsibility to everyone else.